Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and we have a fun one in store. Honestly, when you think about the great wins that Georgia's collected in recent years, the one from Saturday night is going to go up near the top as Georgia, we're calling it the Texas Trilogy, in Austin last October, in Atlanta in December, and in Athens this past weekend. 3-0 against the Longhorns since Texas has tried come into the SEC. And obviously this one, I think, more than just keeping this team that thinks it's going to invade the SEC, keeping them at bay, it's also, we would believe, a pretty strong message about what Georgia can be as you move towards the postseason. There are so many different ways to chop this up and celebrate it and just reflect back on it. We'll do our best to hit the key moments here on the show today, and obviously we'll invite you to participate in some of that with us too. What a time to be a Georgia Bulldogs fan, and what a day to be talking about it all here. So without further ado, what do you say we get it started? It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I want to begin with a word of thank you. If you were at the game on Saturday, man, you made for so many of us a memory. I thought Sanford Stadium was at its absolute best, and I thought that Kirby Smart did a good job of crediting this on his post-game press conference on Saturday, really even before the game began. And I think on X on Saturday night said it's like a spectacle. And it's amazing to me what a big game environment has become. It's like every year more and more gets added to this. Pyrotechnics and the light up with the wristbands, and obviously the crowd was making noise. I thought the music matched with that well. I just thought the whole thing was just really amazing, and there's nowhere I'd rather be. And as Kirby Smart has said over and over again, in these moments, it is just it's almost impossible. It's almost impossible to be a visiting team in a situation like this, and not just be overcome by everything working against you. Georgia obviously feeds off this. This was just such a fun win, such a great day to be a Georgia Bulldogs fan. And we're going to do our best to talk about it in a lot of different ways here. I want to start with Gunner Stockton. And this is in many ways something I almost hate doing, because to me it's the cheapest, easiest, low-hanging fruit. The moment somebody has a good game, oh, well, Heisman Trophy. It's just such an easy thing to do. And for the most part, we try to avoid that around here. But I do think giving proper context to the performance from Gunner Stockton is really appropriate. I thought Connor Riley had a great, piece about this at DawgNation.com. And when you look at what Stockton has now done through 10 games for Georgia, it really rivals, if not exceeds, what Stetson Bennett did in 2022 when he became a Heisman finalist for UGA then. And that Bennett back then was obviously a magical performer in big games, had a penchant for clutch moments. But the truth is, on a team that also included Brock Bowers and to a certain extent Ladd McConkey, but especially Brock Bowers, Bennett was not going to be the best player on that offense. But for now, with all due respect, because Georgia's got a lot of very good players in this offense, Gunner Stockton may be the best player on this Georgia offense. He accounted, after all, y'all, for goodness sakes, 5 touchdowns on Saturday. He threw for 4. He rushed for 1. To give you an idea of how impressive the Gunner Stockton season is now, he's the SEC leader in completion percentage while also being 5th in the SEC in rushing touchdowns. Not among quarterbacks, of course, but among anybody in the league. He's got almost as many rushing touchdowns as anybody while leading the league in completion percentage. He's been at the top of the league in passing efficiency to the extent that you care about that sort of thing. Gunner Stockton is having an amazing year. And back during the offseason, we would talk about this, and when others would try to fan the flames of, are we sure Gunner Stockton ought to be starting at Georgia? And, we always said, we think that Georgia's going to be fine, that Gunner Stockton's going to be fine, that Gunner Stockton is going to be the typical Georgia quarterback. There's nothing to worry about here. We said that plenty. But obviously, in retrospect, we underestimated Gunner by a long shot, and we were wrong too. Some of the panic peddlers were obviously very wrong about this, but we were wrong in ourselves in that while we said, typical Georgia quarterback, you've got nothing to worry about here. He's going to put up a stat line similar to what Georgia quarterbacks do. No, as of now, Gunner Stockton is exceeding the performance of the typical Georgia quarterback, so much so that after this game against Texas on Saturday, you very much have to take him seriously as someone who could win the Heisman Trophy. And his candidacy after this game, and when the final TV ratings come in on this, we think it's going to be gigantic, probably more than 10 million people. And on a big stage like that, when you have this big performance, Gunner Stockton, I think, is now a very real Heisman Trophy contender. He's not the only person on this Georgia offense playing well, but man, Gunner is playing very well. He would appear to be the straw that is stirring the drink here at the moment. And I thought, very similar to some of the stuff that I just said on the ABC broadcast of the game on Saturday, Kirk Herbstreit, Chris Fowler, I thought they talked about this pretty well too, that this is getting pretty serious and pretty real for him right now. This is audio of Fowler and Herbstreit having their own turn to talk about Stockton's Heisman candidacy. This is obviously from the game.
What about Gunner Stockton? I feel like the Heisman trend, I'm not big on he had a good game, give him the Heisman. But the Heisman is just, it's so wide open. And it just feels like the last few years it comes down to who gets hot at the end of the year. We saw today, some great performances. And Gunner Stockton has stepped up. Jeremiah Love in Notre Dame. I mean,
it's wide open, man.
I'm just saying, this kid, he's played so well in these big games.
True, by that measuring stick. Stats are strong. They're not going to be eye-popping by the standards of a lot of heavy pass offenses, of course. But
right.
Think about the intangibles and what he means to the team.
He had 5 total touchdowns tonight and 5 incompletions against Texas. Top 10 team.
Efficiency. I think it's going to come down to how guys perform on Championship Saturday. Perhaps Gunner won't be playing on that day, but he's got a big Georgia Tech game, coming up as a showcase.
So a couple of things there about that. I think that Kirk Herbstreit gives you a pretty amazing number. This is a very good Texas defense. This is a top 10 team, and Texas wanted this game bad. Texas thought they were going to get this game, and they thought they were going to be emerging from what was obviously a pretty rough start to the season for them. Instead, what they found was Gunner Stockton, as Kirk said it, as many touchdowns as incompletions. 5 touchdowns, 5 incompletions. Against this Texas defense, that is an amazing performance. And I think something that Chris Fowler also says there too is, look, guys like Fernando Mendoza and Julian Saint are having very good years, but they're not having necessarily the typical Heisman quarterback year. And so if some of this is how Gunner's playing and some of this is also how others are playing around him, while Saint and Mendoza are probably the favorites, neither are having the kind of year that would allow himself to run away with this, which keeps Gunner involved. The Tech game on Black Friday is going to get a lot of attention. Georgia, it would help them if they could be in the SEC championship. That'd be another stage for it, but I don't know that you have to have that happen. Gunner's going to have some moments before Heisman voting tabulations are done that I think give him a chance to be in serious consideration. I think he deserves to be. Whether he wins the award, I don't know. going to New York, I think that's a real possibility. And I think it's probably a very deserving thing. Now, to go back to the Stetson Bennett comparison, look, Bennett was great in the best games. And those games take place after the Heisman voting's already taken place. So that's a fairly nebulous point for the award itself. But in terms of being for Georgia what Stetson once was, how you play in a college football playoff is going to determine that. And obviously Gunner's going to have his chance on that same proving ground. So let's give Stetson the credit he does deserve for what happened in those postseason games. But in terms of a Heisman candidacy based on the regular season, Gunner is every bit the candidate that Bennett once was. In a year he became a Heisman finalist. If anything, maybe Gunner truly has surpassed that, and we certainly hope Heisman voters take notice of that. Certainly Kirby Smart himself was willing to talk about how well Gunner Stockton's playing for this Georgia offense. This is what Kirby said on that after the game.
Man, he just leads. He does a great job. I mean, the run to me to ice the game, I think it was second long. I don't know what it was. They ran the sweep, quarterback sweep, and he just, I was like, man, he's going to get 3 or 4. And all of a sudden he stuck his foot in the ground and just ran through people and got a first down. That was a huge play in the game. His decision-making's been good. And look, I mean, he is a great player. He is a great competitor. But he also benefits from a really good offensive line, and Mike and the offensive staff. I mean, people don't give our offensive staff enough credit. I mean, they do a tremendous job, and we're hard to defend. I mean, there's 3 touchdowns on quarterback run, and then all of a sudden he's running the quarterback run, and there's a guy wide open in the back of the end zone that ran right by you that didn't block you, and it's a great play. And you can't do them unless you got a quarterback like Gunner that can execute with the words and the language and command the huddle and manage the clock. He's playing at a high level and a high clip right now, and we got to keep getting him better and getting him more tools to work with around him.
Yeah, it's really important that when we talk about Gunner Stockton in this light, as Kirby said, a lot of this is great offensive line, a group that's gotten better and better as the season has gone along. A lot of this is a lot of weapons around Gunner that he is utilizing well. We're not here to say that the entirety of Saturday night was the Gunner Stockton show. Of course, that's not true. But what we are here to say is, for what is essentially a quarterback's award, whether it should be or shouldn't be, Gunner Stockton is playing at, I mean, if you're watching on video, the rushing touchdown that he got on Saturday, a little bit like the rushing touchdown he got against Ole Miss. I mean, that was an athletic feat. That was a thing of beauty. And so for what has become essentially a quarterback's award, whether it should be or it shouldn't be, Gunner Stockton is playing the quarterback position right now as someone who is very much worthy of strong consideration for this award. So count us here, DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, as very much Gunner for Heisman here right now. All right, let me shift gears to something completely different for a moment. So when you ask Kirby Smart about what wins football games, and he said this going into the game against Texas, he always points it back to the players, almost to a fault. Kirby Smart, in a lot of the remarks that he makes, pregame, postgame, anything else, almost goes out of his way to downplay the role that coaching decisions make in the outcome of games. Kirby puts this on players. He's always been self-deprecating about this himself as a great coach. Well, he says, well, the great coach is the one that has the better players. He even said that last week going into the game. He just says that sort of thing a lot. However, in a game like this against Texas, when you look over on the other side and you see the loaded roster of talent that Texas has, Georgia's got its own version of that, you knew this was going to be a knockdown, drag-out battle. And the truth is, if you want to get into like the box scores and things like that of the Georgia-Texas game, there is an element in which this game, certainly the Texas people tell you this, that from a box score standpoint, you know, Texas kind of hung with Georgia. But when you look at the final margin of victory, it's 25 points. It's 35-10. It's a total dominant outcome. So how do you go from a box score that's relatively close to a final score that shows Georgia winning the thing by 25 points? This is where you get back on the coaching part of this. And this is where Kirby Smart, now going into, or now in the midst of his 10th season as Georgia coach, is now pushing buttons for his talent that gives his very prodigious talent a chance to not only win games, but really dominate a team like Texas that is as deep and as, you know, and as talent rich as any roster is going to be. And of course, the example of that from Saturday was the onside kick call. Georgia had just gone on a 6-minute scoring drive to take a 21-10 lead, and that in itself is demoralizing. And then Georgia comes back, and with good reason. Obviously, the Texas return man had some success, had the potential of almost breaking a touchdown, but Georgia just goes out there and rolls the dice in a really smart way, gets the extra possession for itself, and then builds a lead that Texas was not going to be able to come back from. And so, I mean, just poetic justice, so apropos that the former Texan, I guess he's still a Texan, but he's playing for Georgia, Cash Jones, he's the one that's there to pick up that onside kick. This was an absolutely perfect moment. And it was the kind of thing that was almost jaw-dropping. Georgia rolling the dice, it working out as well as it did. The roar from the crowd when this happened was, oh my gosh. This was one of the all-time memories for any of us who were there, or for those of you watching on TV. DawgNation everywhere was just beside themselves after all of this went down. Let me let you hear Kirby Smart talking about every angle of the decision to go for the onside kick and the pressure that a coach feels when it's time to consider rolling the dice in that moment. This is Kirby Smart after the game.
Well, we worked that a lot, and we practiced a lot. And little walk-on kid from Texas, Cash Jones. I mean, he I bet you he's taken 250 reps of that in his time being here, and he kept asking me, when are we ever going to call it, Coach? I'd love to do it. I'd love to do it. And we just felt like it was there. They got the best returner in the country. I'd already seen him enough. One time about burst through a hole that an 18-wheeler could have gone through, and we got a holding call that prevented it, but I wasn't kicking it to him again. I'd just soon kick it to one of those front guys.
What do you believe that did in terms of momentum for the game?
Yeah, it's heartbreaking when that happens, because you just gave up a touchdown and the defense is over there drinking water, and they all of a sudden got to go back out. So I don't know what the continuous time was they were on the field, but our offense is like a big, strong anaconda just squeezing you. And you get squeezed, and you finally catch a little air, and then they're back trying to suffocate you. So it was a big momentum play, and it would have been, every one of y'all would have thought I was an idiot if it didn't work. So that's okay too. That's part of football.
Listen, we would talk a lot about how good the post-game press conferences are from Kirby Smart. The one on Saturday night's an all-timer. We're about to, in a minute, give you several of like the A-list highlights from that. You're going to love all of them. That's coming up in a moment. Let me stay focused on just this onside kick from right now. One of the things that Kirby said a lot after the game is something he briefly referenced there is, how about just a former walk-on, the kid from Texas who recovers it? That's Cash Jones. There was a lot from Kirby post-game on the way that his Texans, guys like Joseph Jonah-Janye, Noah Thomas, Cash, others, the way Justin Williams, the way they played in this game. Pretty clearly, Kirby wanted this to be a good day for the Texans on his roster. It's fairly obvious he was thinking about that, including for Cash Jones right there. I also think there is a very ruthless aspect to this. Kirby Smart was asked, hey, what do you do for the momentum when you do this? And Kirby very honestly says, it's heartbreaking for the opposing defense because, and I love the very descriptive statement here, this is the second time this season Kirby's described his offense as like an anaconda, which is, how it is, the constrictor snake, it wraps around you, squeezes you to death. On a 6-minute scoring drive, that's what Georgia's doing, squeezing the life out of Texas. And Kirby's like, okay, so they go over there to get a drink of water. It is heartbreaking for them to have to do the quick change, drop the cup on the ground and run back on the field. And from a coaching standpoint, it's almost like that's a pretty good question to keep asking yourself. What's the most heartbreaking thing I could do to inflict torture on my opponent right now? And maybe that's what you should mostly do. Kirby in this moment's like, what would this defense hate right now more than anything? To have to run back and play defense once again? Let's see if we can get this onside kick. It was executed perfectly. Let's see if we can make that happen. It's a very interesting way to think about coaching of what would my opponent least like for me to do right now? And maybe that's the thing we ought to do more. Now, Kirby's right. There's always a degree of second guessing around these things. And Kirby says, y'all would have called me an idiot if this didn't quite work out. And there is some element where coaches are always going to get Monday morning quarterback for anything that doesn't work. But I would send this message to Georgia fans. I mean, it's easy to say this after something like this works, but I want you to keep this in mind the next time something like this might not work, because it's not a risky decision. It's not a bold call if there wasn't some downside negative potential impact that could come from this. And here's the thing that I want. And I'm going to make the comparison. Gunner's thrown, a couple of interceptions this year, and Kirby Smart's essentially downplayed both INTs. He did it a little bit on Saturday. The first one early in the season, he definitely did it because that was back when they were trying to teach Gunner to just be a little more free and easy out there. That you can live with the interception if it comes from a quarterback trying to make something happen. And I think the Georgia coaching staff does firmly believe that. They even basically said that again on Saturday. I think you got to view your coach the same way. The very best version of Kirby Smart is the aggressive version of Kirby Smart, going for it on fourth down. That was big a couple of times on Saturday. This onside kick, that was very big. Georgia had not recovered an onside kick since 2013. They don't try a ton of them, had not really recovered one. This was a very aggressive coaching decision. Kirby is at his best when he's aggressive, not because it always works, but because for a team that typically has the talent advantage over the opponent, when it's a talent advantage matched with an aggressive coach, that's just the toughest version of Georgia to beat. So maybe the next time Georgia rolls the dice on something like this and it doesn't work, try to keep that in mind of, I'd rather my coach go down trying to be aggressive, going for it on fourth down, going for touchdowns as opposed to field goals, trying the onside kick, rolling the dice a little here and there. I'd rather my guy do that than playing it very conservatively, because honestly, that, to borrow an old phrase, the scared money in that situation does not make money. So maybe just something to keep in mind. But when you pair the onside kick and the advantage that built for Georgia with what Georgia did in the rest of this game, when we look back on this past Saturday night against a team that we've learned to hate since they've come in the SEC, Texas, and Georgia was as Georgia as it has ever been in this spot. What a night, what a memory, what a great time to be a Georgia fan. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And by the way, the best stuff from Saturday we think is still to come. We'll give that to you here in a moment. But first, let me thank you for watching and listening to us today on video, all platforms, live, on demand, anything else, YouTube, DawgNation.com, Facebook, radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, podcast, Apple, Spotify, our oldest platform, our venerable traditional platform for those of you who listen to the show on there. Man, I'm so thankful for that. Golly, I still think of us as a podcast, and I still think audio first when it comes to this show. I'm just so thankful for so many of you who've been such a big part of all of that with us. And man, I am so happy to have great sponsors here too. Thursday we did DawgNation on Tap. Our friends from Pella came to see us, Brian Robbins and Cassidy, his daughter, and the other Brian. They were just a great group of folks from Pella who were there. I love their support. Obviously, I feel so deeply connected with them at DawgNation. They love Georgia football. They love serving Georgia fans. They're just great parts of the community. I just love them so much. I'm so thankful to have them as a part of our program here today. And I love what they do for you, too. We're in that fall time of year where it's breezy, it gets cold. You got your heat on maybe. Certainly as we get closer to the winter, that's going to be true more and more, heading towards that Christmas season. You want to keep your home feeling good on the inside while it's sometimes kind of messy on the outside. That's what you want. That's what Pella allows you to do. Now, when you upgrade to Pella windows, you're going to get improved curb appeal from that, and that's a good thing. It can impact positively the resale value for your home, but it's also the best way to take the best care of your property. And let's face it, when it comes to stuff like this, windows are transparent. You see right through them. And so therefore, because you don't really see them when you look at them, maybe sometimes you don't think about them. But it's time to think about what a window upgrade could do for you. What are the little nagging problems you may notice for your house? Draftiness. This zone of the home feels super comfortable. This zone doesn't feel quite as good. A lot of that traces back to your windows. And if it's the same windows that you've had since your house was built, they're probably inefficient. They're probably improperly sealed. Frankly, they're just old. I hate to tell you that, but they probably are, especially if your house has got a little age to it. And if you haven't thought about windows in a while, you wouldn't believe the technological advancements that Pella has made. Really clever with, in some cases, the shades or the blinds built into the window. It's really sleek look. It can be a really sharp look. As I said before, it can incredibly positively impact the curb appeal of your home, but it's also going to save you money in your energy bills. If you live near a loud road, you're going to cut down on some of that noise, a lot quieter on the inside of your house, and that's one of the things you really want. So All the more reason for you to check out Pella Window and Door of Georgia today, including great saving opportunity right now. About 50% off qualifying installations or 0% APR for 48 months. Great chance to take advantage of that right now. Go to PellaGA.com/DawgNation. That's PellaGA.com/DawgNation, or give them a call, 678-638-1429. That's 678-638-1429. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is going beyond. All right, we've got Jon Stinchcomb coming up here in a moment. We'll get into everything from this great win for Georgia against Texas on Saturday. But prior to that, let me go around the doghouse. Poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. And I want to get a little deeper into what really allowed Georgia to win this game. I'm about to play a handful of clips for you from Kirby Smart. And I'm telling you right now, this is just some of the best stuff you're ever going to hear. You ever have heard from Kirby Smart, you ever will hear from Kirby Smart, because, listen, there is a subtle truth about Georgia versus Texas that I don't know that either side wants to really fully admit, is that Texas in many ways has tried to be the anti-Georgia, and Georgia in many ways we perceive has tried to embody the opposite of what we would say that Texas thinks it's about. Texas feels like a very modern program in what's supposed to be this player empowerment era when there's NIL checks and there's transfer portal and whatever else. Texas is supposed to be at the forefront of leveraging all of those things for its benefit. And Georgia is supposed to be the program that, well, they're not going to figure out NIL and whatever else because Kirby Smart's so stuck and set in his ways about what football used to be, and by what it used to be, that's like 3 years ago, but nonetheless, that Kirby Smart's stuck in the past, and these very modern programs like Texas are going to write big checks, they're going to buy championships, and if you don't like it, then you're just going to get left in the dust, whatever else. Now, those two caricatures of both programs is not quite as true as sometimes it's led to believe. Then the truth is, while some aspects of Texas get on my nerves, the truth is I do respect the team. I mean, they've made the Final Four the last 2 years. So as much as I think of them as all hat, no cattle, all sizzle, no steak, it's not completely fair. They've done some things the last couple of years. You have to give them some respect. And the flip side of that, it's not like the Georgia players are playing for free. Yes, Georgia, embraces a style of football that a lot of the other programs simply don't want to embrace, or maybe can't fully embrace as much as they wish they could. But Georgia's still, writing its own big NIL checks and things like that. So the caricature we have of Georgia and Texas is probably not as fully true as we sometimes think that it is. But there is an element to it that's also more true than I think either side wants to give voice to, because Sark and Kirby do respect each other, but the two programs they lead, in many respects, could not be more different. And it was the Georgia brand that, for the third time since Texas joined the SEC, looked like the better brand on Saturday. And I want to talk for a few minutes about exactly why it is that Georgia's got that done. First of all, the Georgia performance against Texas compared to what it was doing back in September, there is no doubt that Georgia has just week after week continuously improved. It has gotten better. And that is something that on Saturday night, Kirby was happy to acknowledge. What you're about to hear from Kirby over the course of these next couple clips, this is just solid gold. Starting with this, Kirby, on the improvement that Georgia's shown.
Proud of them, man. They've gotten better. I think a lot of teams in the country, it's hard to keep getting better this time of year. You start questioning what I'm doing. I mean, let's be honest, we're 2 months from the portal opening. I mean, there's kids that are like, I don't know if I really want to go out here and get better. I'm not talking about Texas now. I'm talking about just in college football, and that has not been the approach of our team. They continue to get better. They continue to grow. They work hard. They believe in each other. I mean, it's a good football team, guys, but, you're a week away from humility.
One of my favorite movies is Almost Famous from the early 2000s, and the Kate Hudson character in the movie has a line where she says at one point, the truth just sounds different. And when you hear Kirby Smart right there, that's just so true. It is of his team, of college football overall, and the truth just rings so loudly in a statement like that. It just sounds different. That there are a lot of teams, and this is just as honest gets, that are up against the transfer portal. Some players got 1 foot in, 1 foot out, even some good teams that might be true for. And Kirby's like, man, these guys just haven't been that way. They're just bought in. They're willing to work hard, improve, and get better. And this is why we've been saying it since the season began. There is something about this team that Kirby just seems to like, and he's on the inside. He would know. And there were moments, and I've owned this, we've been very honest about this. There have been various times throughout this year where we just weren't so sure. Not so sure how good Georgia is. Not so sure if they were going to figure it all out. Not so sure if this was going to happen for this Georgia team. We weren't quite so sure. We're on the outside looking in. Kirby on the inside, he seemed to know. And maybe what he just described, a team that was willing to work harder than its competition, maybe that is what he knew. Or maybe he knew just how willing this group would be to embrace what Kirby Smart seemingly always demands from his team, which is the willingness to embrace physicality, contact, trade and paint, big hits, hard tackles, knockback tackles. Georgia right now seems to embrace that as much as it ever has, and more so than the teams it's playing. That's just what Georgia seems to be about, and Kirby Smart also talked about that too.
Work. I mean, we believe in being physical. I mean, we get after it. You know, we believe in what we do. We have a process. I don't know that we're doing anything different than anybody else. You know, I had other people say that their practices are similar to ours, but our kids believe in it. Our kids believe in down and dirty. They believe in, you know, the SEAL mantra of let's take them to the water. Let's see who can survive in the water and see who's going to tap out first, ring the bell, and run from the contact contest. And they believe in that. Like, they believe in the physical toughness that it takes to win games. And that has prevailed in a lot of our games, a lot of our tight ball games, that has prevailed.
I mean, listen, I'm here to tell you this, and I wish I had enough time to talk about this as much as I feel like it needs to be talked about. That physicality, that unapologetic masculinity, to be frank, that was maybe supposed to be on its way out of football, and there was supposed to be a smart guy revolution of advanced stats and money management and whatever else, you know, Moneyball type stuff that was supposed to take over and push the old physical, tough-minded football coaches into the periphery. Those guys were supposed to be aging out of the sport, and there was supposed to be a new revolution of smart guy football that was going to push the physicality out. And yet you got a guy in Kirby Smart very much in the coaching prime of his career, still embracing physicality as much as ever. This is such a problem for programs that can't seem to match the way it is that Georgia does it. And the fact that Georgia, even in the midst of all the change that college football has endured, still does it as well as it ever has. Man, what a statement that is in a game like this against Texas. And Kirby Smart mentions the Navy SEALs. Apparently this was a rallying cry for them this week, how they train, what they do, how they get ready. And Smart went into more detail on this. I'm telling you, the stuff we got from Kirby postgame, all-timer, all-time. It's almost like a movie monologue in some cases. All-time stuff from him, going into more detail about Navy SEALs training and how his team matched that with its own game week preparation.
It just fit this game. I mean, it was Drew Brannon, our sports mental guy, and we had a long talk Friday, and we talked about, you know, what's not for some people is for others. And the hardest part of the SEAL training is when they go after the hype phase. Everybody's hyped up before the game. Everybody's hyped up at kickoff. But when they go to that water phase and they go down and do the water torture, surf torture, it's not everybody wants it. It's not for everybody. And people start ringing the bell. And we wanted our guys to take it to the water and see who wanted to ring the bell and be the most physical team. And they enjoyed that. They enjoy that personality.
So if you're not familiar with like the Navy SEAL story, and I only partially know this, the way it works is in the training, you go until you can't handle it anymore. And when you can't handle it anymore, you just walk over and ring the bell. And listen, it's an arduous process. There's really no shame in ringing the bell. I mean, it's not for everybody. And when it's no longer for you, you just walk over and ring the bell. And those that don't ring the bell, they're Navy SEALs. And Do you know how scary it must be if you're trying to compete with Kirby Smart, and Kirby with this stone-faced assassin's look is in the post-game press conference talking about torture and like, do you know how scary that must be for teams that have to play Georgia to listen to him going into all of that about what Georgia did to get ready for this game on Saturday? I want to give you one more here, and this, I think, sums it up. I mean, this is just as Georgia as it gets. In a day and age in which all anybody seems to want to talk about is NIL, Georgia, whose players are well paid too, by the way, are a lot more than about that. One more from Kirby Smart. It's all really, really good. Here's one last one from Kirby.
Yeah, it's the approach we take. We're gonna dominate and try to win the fourth quarter. It's what we do in practice. It's what we do in the off season. It's what we build our core culture around, is being the more physical team. And you have to recruit physical players, and they have to buy into that process. I don't know that a lot of these kids nowadays, they want to check. They don't want physicality. And if you have the check and no physicality, you end up with nothing. So we're not just getting checks at our place. We're hitting people.
I'm just telling you, man, that's as good as Kirby's ever been. And I don't think anything embodies that more so than Georgia. I don't think he's really taking a shot at Texas necessarily. I think he's taking a shot at anybody else in college football who makes it primarily about the paycheck. If you got money and no toughness, eventually the tough guy's going to take your money from you. I mean, that's the story of humanity. And that's still how football works too, that you can get the big check, but if the other team's tougher than you, eventually they're going to get the glory, and eventually they're going to have the success, and eventually they're going to have, the rewards that come from that. And the performance for Georgia against Texas on Saturday night would seem to be the perfect embodiment of all of that. And we'll make that around the Doghouse, poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. We love Dr. Pepper. We love college football. We're proud that when Dr. Pepper thinks about college football, they think about DawgNation Daily, because when we think about college football, we think about Dr. Pepper. When it's game day and you're enjoying time with friends, watching games, of course, the delicious, one-of-a-kind flavor of Dr. Pepper is what you want to enjoy, whether it's the original Dr. Pepper, Diet Dr. Pepper Blackberry, Dr. Pepper Blackberry Zero Sugar. We're coming up on the SEC Championship, and, of course, Dr. Pepper is going to take over Atlanta for that. I'm already excited about that. Huge presence for that game. We hope Georgia's there, too, but we know that Dr. Pepper's going to have a huge presence in the game and heading towards the college football playoff as well. That is what they're all about. We love our friends at Dr. Pepper, and we're proud to have them as a part of Around the Doghouse. So as you're doing your grocery shopping at whatever supermarket you go to, make sure you pick up the rich, one-of-a-kind flavor of Dr. Pepper. We love them, and we're proud to have them as a part of Around the Doghouse. Okay, without further ado, want to get to Jon Stinchcomb. A lot to talk about. Georgia's win against Texas. As Georgia as they've ever been. Kirby Smart described it well. Let's hear what Jon has to say now, too. Here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella, Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Glad to have Jon Stinchcomb. What a day to be talking Georgia football. And I'm telling you, Jon, I don't know that we've ever gotten better stuff from Kirby post-game than some of what we just heard. Because, look, physicality is that kind of thing. And I see this in high school football. And frankly, as my player, growing up myself, there was a certain level of physicality I didn't want to do either, right? I mean, it's not for everybody. And you see this where Georgia does seem to either find guys who already embrace that, choose players who are willing to embrace it, or teach them how to embrace it, whatever it is. They just seem to do that well. And I do think they leaned on that in getting such a convincing win against Texas on Saturday. It was a wonderful night to be at Georgia, but it was also such a reaffirmation of what has made Georgia special in this last, half decade, if not the entirety of the Kirby Smart era. And it certainly also feels like it's not going anywhere anytime soon either. What did you make of what you saw from Georgia, and in particular, how Georgia got it done?
Yeah, the physicality is a pillar of the identity this program has created under Coach Smart. And you look at it, you hear it preached, you hear other programs talk about it, you hear NFL evaluators that are able to see behind the curtain, if you will, at practice, and they recognize there is something different about Georgia. And what an unbelievable performance by this team, but also by Coach Smart during the game and after the game. It was a press release of, this is who Georgia football is. This is what we're about. It was a great atmosphere. It was a great performance, the best of the year, the most complete performance of the year. They played like it was a heavyweight fight, and that they took these haymaker swings and were unrelenting. And there was times in that game where I think there was some tension that was created. You go to 14-10
Yeah.
and creates a little anxiety for the fans. You never saw it from the team itself, and the way they responded to that sort of situation is indicative of their mindset, and something that we've seen time and time again. That it's weird. You go to the games, and when the defense takes the field, it's whatever that line is of we can take a punch, and candidly, it doesn't always sit that well with me, and that I don't know that I've never been a huge fan of Rocky Balboa getting beat for 15 rounds and
That's
then
right.
just out enduring the opponent. And what I think is more defining is that this team can swing a heavy punch, and very few teams can take it. And I think that was one of the biggest differentiating factors was we continued to take those big swings and those big punches, and we're delivering them. We're not just taking them.
No, I think that's exactly right. And I'm glad you also brought up the other point, too, because I don't mind saying this. There was a stretch, middle portion of this game, where Georgia had gotten defensive stops 5 straight times. And on the ensuing offensive possession, Georgia didn't get any points. And I don't mind telling you, I was pretty nervous during that stretch because Georgia had come out like a house of fire offensively, built the early lead. But in my mind, I'm thinking, man, it's sitting here 14-3. A field goal makes this essentially a one-score game. 14-10, who knows where this goes? And eventually it did get to 14-10. But there was definitely a part where I thought, my gosh, if Georgia can't build on this lead while it's getting all these defensive stops, it's likely going to regret it. Now, somehow it lived on that razor's edge and eventually found the way to pull out, and pull away late, and we'll give them more credit for that in a moment. But I don't mind telling you, there was a moment in which Georgia's getting the stops that it needed when it wasn't capitalizing, where I was kind of wondering, boy, where's this going to go if Georgia doesn't find some way to add to this?
Yeah, we get so spoiled, I think is probably the best word. And we want to boat race every team. Texas is a top 10 team in the country. And we came out fast, something that we've complained about from this Georgia team all season. We finished strong. We end up having a 25-point differential margin from one of the best teams in the country, top 10 team in the country. And yet there is that period of time where we're going, oh boy, buckle up. Can we get my phone I get texts from my buddy in Alabama, Gator's texting me saying, hey, you still a Bobo fan? When, it's a couple series in a row that, we sputter, and the defense is who we've relied on. And that's not really been the storyline multiple games this season. And it's usually been, I'm thinking Ole Miss, where the offense has had to respond and stay in front. And yet you've talked about it already on this show. It's the development of this team, the development of the players, the continued progression that we have witnessed with our own eyes. It's a better team. It's a different team than what we've seen the week prior. And it was also in Coach Smart's press conference. It's a testament to how this program is built. And so during those stressful moments when you're in a big game and it's not perfect, it's still I have faith in because it's earned that this team is willing and wanting to respond to those tense moments.
No, I think that's right. And this for me was an eye-opening performance. And I'm trying not to, be overly hyperbolic, whatever, because, there's a tendency to just want to hype up whatever's going on. But John, this to me was a statement, the likes of which we have not seen from Georgia, and the likes of which I wasn't sure we would see from Georgia this year. And I still don't know how it all ends. It's a crowded field competing not just in the SEC, but in college football overall, making no proclamations about where it ends. But what feels possible for me is completely different now than what seemed possible just a few weeks ago. I think Texas is a good team. And to see Georgia pull away from Texas the way that it did in the final, call it like say 20 minutes of this game, fourth quarter and in end of third, to pull away from Texas the way that it did, you have to be a highest of the high level team to be able to do that. It's not only a good Texas team, it's a really good Texas defensive front, but eventually Georgia did soften it up and started getting more success in the run game as it went along. I thought this was a real eye-opening performance where now I think you have to consider Georgia a contender for the whole thing now in a way that a couple of weeks ago I don't know that I thought they were.
You didn't think they were. We had this conversation.
That's exactly right.
It was, I don't think that this is the team that can make a national championship run. And at the time, they were not. It's a better team today than it was. The performance is better. The players are better. And as much as I have confession moment here, been critical at times of specific coaches, of developing players, we have seen and been the beneficiaries of that. You look out and the performance is there, that this isn't the same team. The players are getting better and they're putting in the work, and we're the beneficiaries of a much better product. You looked at the roster early on and you almost felt like it was an excuse of like, oh, this is a young team compared to others. And, so many of the players, over half the team is first or second year guys on campus. And you're going, I don't care. And candidly, most fans don't. Those are just excuses. Don't tell me about the labor. Just show me the baby. Mm-hmm. And right now the product is better. And the work that they're putting in is paying dividends. And as you get closer to December and that early signing day, when you're talking about recruiting, there is no better recruiting tool than one, winning football games and championships, and two, being able to tell these highly talented players that are being recruited by the top programs across the country, we can make you better. Yeah. We are getting guys that come in as 4 and 5 star rated players, meaning that they have high ceilings, and we can get you to your best. We have seen it. We can show it to you. Here are players that come in that were highly touted, that this is where we got them and this is where we're taking them. And I think there's nothing better that a program can offer, not only the student athletes it's recruiting, but its fan base, of saying, we're creating synergy here. The whole is better than the parts when we get them.
A lot of questions are coming in about injury situation right now. Obviously, C.J. Allen, most prominent there on that. Kirby Smart on Saturday describes it as a knee. I think we have some video we can show for those watching on video of C.J. Allen walking off the field after the injury took place. You try not to read body language too much. That seems like a worried face to me with C.J. Allen right there. John, neither one of us are medical professionals, but the sense that I get is almost zero chance. Obviously, CJ plays against Charlotte. Beyond that, I don't know. Certainly hopeful that he can play for Georgia again this season. And obviously the season progresses long enough where that becomes a big factor. But I do get the sense, just based on the chatter that's out there right now, based on what we're looking at from C.J. Allen and given who Georgia plays this week, that the questions about Allen's status are probably likely to linger for a few weeks here. And, hopefully he plays again, but I don't get the impression that he's likely to play this week. And if I had to guess, I would wonder if the Tech game is also in doubt there too. All of that's just my best, most educated guess. But it seems serious enough that Allen's likely to miss time, and we're going to probably be facing these questions for a few weeks here. And then beyond that, who knows? But this is not one of those things I expect when Kirby Smart speaks to me later on today. He's going to stand at the podium and say, "Oh yeah, we found out he's just fine. He's ready to go for Charlotte." My guess is whatever this is probably at least more serious than that.
Yeah, and I doubt that we'll get a very clear picture. That's not something that Georgia has consistently offered as to this is the exact situation. This is when you can expect him back. So I don't think you're going to get that kind of clarity from any of the reports coming out of Athens. And here's the thing: there's good news and bad news. The bad news is CJ Allen is hurt, right? To start there, he is a phenomenal player and been a huge factor on the field and in his own performance. But the bigger issue there is the impact that he has on the players around him. There are
Yes.
certain players that make their team better, and CJ is one of those guys. That the performances from his teammates is better when he is on the field, and so that's going to hurt. In addition to losing an exceptional linebacker that has been, in my opinion, the defensive player of the game week after week after week uh, for the better part of this season, um, is the impact that it's going to be felt on the guys around him. And, the good news in this situation is that, we've got some other really talented, athletic linebackers that are chomping at the bit to try to carve out a little more
That's right.
space for their own playing time. But replacing that leadership, replacing that presence that CJ Allen has on the field, you can't just replicate that. And it's not just having a linebacker that can run from sideline to sideline and diagnose and get people on the right page and have the instincts that he has. It's really a challenge for any team when they lose that cornerstone for however long it is, even in practice. It creates opportunity. Luckily for Georgia, they've got really talented players. That's one of the deepest position groups, in my opinion, on this team, but not an easy replacement when you lose. You're probably your MVP up to this point on your team.
You got the issue with Chauncey Bowens. I really don't have a ton of insight on that right now, but that's something you'll be listening for. And I guess Christian Miller, Dylan Bell, they go down a little bit on Saturday. It seemed like they were probably fine. At least I hope that was the case. The Bowens thing may be slightly more serious than whatever Bell or Miller were dealing with. I don't know that I have a lot of insight on the Bowens thing, but that's another guy. You may hear him out against Charlotte too, and he's important enough that you want him to be healthy as well. But I don't know that I have a ton of insight on how serious or not whatever Chauncey dealt with on Saturday was. John, any crackpot medical opinion you want to share on that?
No speculation coming from me. I will say that's this is the Georgia season. You talked about in one hand the glowing aspects of the physicality that the way Georgia runs its program, that it creates this toughness that few teams can match. The downside is injuries come along with it.
Yeah.
Texas came into this game with almost zero players on their injury report, and we're not able to match the physicality of Georgia for the entirety of that game. And I think again, I'll take the good, the pros over the cons of the way Georgia is set up, but parts of the cons of the way we practice, the way we play, is with the physicality being an emphasis and a pillar of who we are, that identity that Georgia has. Injuries come with it, and you need to have depth. Depth is a challenge for every program across the board. I think Georgia is set up in a way that can possibly sustain that in specific spaces better than others. We've seen it across the board, and now with a number of players that we count on a week in, week out basis, other guys will need to step up. And Chauncey has been our best running back, most consistent running back this year, but we've also Nate Frazier. I think most teams across this country would be thrilled if he was your number one, and started this year as our clear number one. So in pretty good hands there. We've had other wide receivers step up. I think same could be said really across the board. I think one of the more concerning issues would be if Kristen Miller is down for any significant time, especially with coming on the heels of that Jordan Hall injury. So depth is always a concern. It's part of the nature of being this late in the season, having played as many big games as Georgia plays in. I'm sure they're grateful that it's Charlotte week and not another SEC heavyweight bout.
I want to ask you one more thing at the risk of keeping you too long, but just to sum this up, on a day in which we're up beside it, we're so happy, everything's great. Some of these injuries are starting to pile up a little bit, and it's worth paying attention to. You've already lost Jordan Hall. You're playing without Kyron Jones, and injuries are part of football. Don't get me wrong on that. But some of these are kind of adding up a little bit. So let's just be careful about. I mean, there's nothing we can do. They're hurt or they're not. But some of these injuries are kind of piling up for Georgia on defense, and that could be worth paying attention to, especially for someone like C.J. Allen, who has been such a heart and soul performer for this Georgia defense. Jon, to wrap it up, though, on a much happier note, I think that Gunner Stockton's a real live Heisman Trophy contender right now. And it's not just the ridiculous hype, as Kirk Herbstreit said, if a guy has a good game, let's give him the Heisman Trophy. I really think this is deeper than that. Leading the SEC in completion percentage, 5th in the SEC in touchdowns among all players, not obviously just quarterbacks. He's essentially been the most efficient passer, and he had a gigantic game on a terrific stage, massive TV audience for the win against Texas on Saturday, with more opportunities to come before the Heisman votes are tabulated. I don't know if he wins the award or not. Sayan and Mendoza have probably been ahead of him. There may be others who've been ahead of him too. But I think he does deserve some votes. I think at the very least a Heisman finalist, a chance to go to New York City. And, I think it's nice to see his candidacy start to get some of the attention that it warrants. I think this is real. I think this is a conversation that needs to be had.
And I would say this, some of his best characteristics, some of the reasons why I'm so grateful he is QB1 for Georgia don't show up as glowing marks in the stat book. Early on in this season, when most quarterbacks would have taken sacks, he found a way to make it positives. He was gaining ground. He would move the pocket. He took some shots on Saturday that I think a lot of quarterbacks would have been really slow to get up from. And he's just keeps chugging along. And man, what a performance again on the biggest stage. The team loves him. You see why. Probably won't have those stats that make jaws drop across the nation at the end of the year. But for those that have watched him play this entirety of the season, his biggest critique, his most critical evaluators are saying he makes good plays when great opportunities were out there. I'll take that every day of the week because, man, he plays winning football. He's more than a manager. He makes everyone around him better, all those things. And he covers up for a lot of the mistakes that we've seen early on and continues to move this offense in a way that you end up winning the game. So I think it's hard-earned that he's getting this national recognition. I'm in agreement with you. I think he probably doesn't win the Heisman, but he has certainly warranted this level of regard that has come his way because his performance has been remarkable at times and put this offense on his back.
Jon, great stuff. What a great win for Georgia, and great time to be talking about that with you. I appreciate all of your insight onto all of that. What a fun ride it expects to be for Georgia throughout the rest of November into what we think can be a really, really entertaining postseason too. So thanks for doing it with us here today, Jon. Glad to have you here. We'll look forward to having you again soon on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia as well.
Appreciate it, BA. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So Jon Stinchcomb, a great guest for us on Monday. Do I have this right tonight on the beat with Cody Chaffins, Mike Griffith, Ladd McConkey, a special guest on that show tonight? Is that correct? How about that? So Mike and Cody got Ladd McConkey coming on tonight. That's a cool thing. So that's tonight, 7 p.m. DawgNation video channels, your chance to see that. Ladd McConkey, a very special guest on the Beat. That is fun. Before we do our SEC through, let's also shout out the Christmas season here. Getting stocked up and ready to go for that. And really no better place to do that than your local Academy Sports and Outdoors. They've got an awesome thing for you coming up here this Christmas. The very special, exclusive, by the way, at Academy Sports and Outdoors. The Magellan, it's an amazing thing here. You love that. that they've got going on for the Magellan set there. They got you ready to go for that. But also all kinds of other great stuff here too. Football jerseys, basketball hoops. You want a fire pit, you want a deer stand, anything like that. You can get ready for everything you need at your local Academy Sports and Outdoors. Whatever you want to make it a wonderful time for you, you can get that there at Academy or online, academy.com. We love everything they're doing to help you getting ready for the Christmas season. You can get some good-looking UGA gear there. If you want a fire pit to let everybody hang around with in the backyard, or if you want that great sport that you're part of to be even better, you can get everything you need. The basketball goal, all that kind of stuff. Every kid needs a basketball goal, we think. So you can get yours there at Academy Sports and Outdoors. Santa Claus, big fan of a lot of the stuff that happens there at Academy, and a lot of folks don't realize how closely Santa Claus sometimes works with the people at Academy, but that is a real thing. I have seen that with my own eyes. Okay, let's get ready to go now SEC through here, and I want to step away from Georgia just for a moment and talk about a couple of the other results from Saturday. Probably focus on maybe just two of these for right now, but because they were two big ones. And you're like me, you're sitting there at your home getting ready to go to Athens, and you've got this wild game between South Carolina and Texas A&M, where South Carolina builds, a 30-3 halftime lead here, and that in itself was shocking. And then equally as shocking is the way in which Texas A&M mounts the comeback in the second half. And listen, there is an element in which I just hate this for South Carolina, because I do believe that Shane Beamer is a good coach. He's a guy that I really like. I consider myself to be a pretty big fan of Shane Beamer. I think he's a guy that tries to do this the right way. I think he has a good personality to have in the SEC. But boy, it's a misstep on Saturday. There's the video that's going around everywhere of him celebrating with his fans, going into the halftime locker room. I say this with all due respect as someone who's a big fan. Man, you can't do that. It's just such a huge mistake, because here's the thing about being up 27 points. In football, they give you 6 points for a touchdown. So when you're up 27, you're really up 4. And the moment they score, now you're only up 3. And you're up 3 with them still getting probably 4 or 5 more possessions to go in the game. Then they score again. Now you're only up 2. And all of a sudden now, as that lead starts to dwindle, it's A&M that starts to believe, it's South Carolina that starts to diminish on that. And so, it's a pretty good South Carolina team. They've obviously played a very tough schedule. They start off preseason top 15. Now they're not going to make a bowl game, it doesn't appear, or at least they're even maybe mathematically eliminated from bowl consideration. It's a huge drop-off from where they were. Just really hard in this current SEC right now, and it is as simple as that. On the flip side, though, boy, A&M as a program, it has really changed. I mean, they are on the verge of their most successful season, not just in my lifetime, not just your dad's lifetime, probably in your grandfather's lifetime. A&M hasn't been number one since the 1930s. And this is a team that's making a real push to be ranked number one at some point, if not by the end of the season. And for so many years, games like this have just slipped away. Even the comeback attempt falls just short. It slips out of their grasp at the last moment. But that's not what they're doing right now. Mike Elko is making that team into true believers. And, last week we got Indiana getting the loving kindness from the playoff selection committee because of its hard-fought win against Penn State on, and whatever happened there. It'll be interesting to see what they say about A&M on Saturday, because it wasn't a very game-controlling performance. But, boy, they showed a lot of moxie. And I think you've got to be pretty impressed with Texas A&M right now. I think you really do. Obviously, the AP poll comes out. They are at number 3. Indiana and Ohio State, the 2 unbeatens, above them. Georgia does move up to number 4. How well this reflects what we're going to see from the selection committee on Saturday, or I should say when it comes out on Tuesday night, we shall see. Oklahoma also in at 8 now after beating Alabama. That was the other game that I wanted to talk about. And look, we get plenty wrong. We obviously do. But the one thing that we have gotten right is we have said for a while we've been a little suspicious about the Alabama offense. This has not been an Alabama offense that's been playing great football. And we thought that they were due for a letdown at some point. It didn't necessarily have to be a loss, but closer than experts thought. We called for that last week against LSU. Ultimately, Alabama didn't succumb to that. But they also didn't play very well offensively last week either. So they were vulnerable coming into this game. We said so, especially against an Oklahoma defense. That was a rough moment for the voice right there if you heard that. But the point is, this was a vulnerable Alabama team that had not been playing well offensively against an Oklahoma defense that's really, really good. And obviously they got after Alabama on Saturday so much that they won the game. This is a huge win for Brent Venables. Alabama just rarely loses at home. And for Oklahoma to get this win, boy, I think you got to now take them very seriously as a college football playoff team. It is not exactly a pushover for them on Saturday coming up against Missouri. It'll be LSU to close out the season. Both games for Oklahoma are at home. But I think now this is an Oklahoma team that looks like it's going to, should be taken very seriously as a team in the college football playoff. When you go on the road, I mean, they've won on the road back-to-back games against Tennessee, now against Alabama. Those are real significant accomplishments, and they're a better team than I expect them to be. Even with John Mateer not exactly being as good as this season some people thought that he would be. But what they've done defensively, this is just an incredibly stout defense. And so now you're left to wonder, okay, well, how many playoff teams in the SEC are there going to be? And, what does this do to the overall pecking order within the SEC? Vanderbilt may be a team that's hurt by this. Texas, I mean, it was weird in the broadcast on Saturday night. You still had Kirk Herbstreit making the case for Texas making the playoff at 9-3 if they were to somehow beat Texas A&M. Thankfully, Georgia, by getting to 7-1 in conference play, now they're done on that. We think Georgia is essentially clinched a college football playoff spot. We believe that's the case. So thankfully, Georgia, by beating Texas, probably stays out of the a lot of the the muck and the mire on this. But there's about to be a very intense playoff debate about how many teams from the SEC deserve to go. Probably a large number, 5, I think maybe 6, maybe in consideration here, and who are actually the SEC teams that make the cut on that. But you've got to be very impressed by what you saw from Oklahoma on Saturday, going on the road, getting it done in a place where the Crimson Tide rarely loses. And I do think Alabama's got to figure some stuff out offensively. They're not running the ball really at all. And listen, I think that Ryan Williams, for all the attention that he's kind of gone quiet a little bit. This is not an explosive, dynamic Alabama offense right now. And if you're thinking about more than just making the playoff from them, now listen, obviously this is not like trash talk. This is not Georgia fan. I'm trying to be objective here because clearly Alabama beat Georgia. This is not a trash talk thing. This is just a football evaluation thing. That for me right now, Alabama does not have the look of a national championship level team. They're just not dynamic enough on offense right now to be able to do that. Absence of a running game, what's supposed to be. I mean, really, right now it looks like Bernard's their best receiver, more so than Ryan Williams. It seems like they've got some stuff to figure out. Big win, though, on the road for Oklahoma. And a major, major step towards the Sooners with Brent Venables beginning the year as one of the coaches most on the hot seat in the SEC, perhaps concluding with a trip to the college football playoff and now a very crowded field. We showed you the AP Top 10 a moment ago. There are 9 SEC teams in the AP Top 25 overall, and maybe 5, maybe more SEC playoff teams when it's all said and done too. A pretty amazing time for this league, as deep as it has ever been. And Dawgs still on top, which we like a lot too. And that is your SEC through. So we'll wrap it up today, but I promise you we got plenty more on Georgia, Texas, and what we learned about Georgia from that. We'll do that this week as we head towards Saturday. The game against Charlotte, and what's really going to be a very special senior day for Georgia coming up this week. Hard to believe. I mean, how did you get there so fast? Season just flies by, but we'll have a lot on the game from this past Saturday as we get ready for this Saturday's game too. It's going to be a fun and busy week here around DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, which is exactly the way we like it. We'll also have a lot of golden shoes here this week too. I want to give one right now though to Hunter Jones, who shared this. His dad got to go to the Georgia game this weekend. He says it's its only in-person experience in Sanford Stadium, except for like a couple of small times. Going back to Vaughn Hemingway, I guess there. He says, safe to say Sanford and Dog Nation are going to have him ready for a treat. So really good stuff from Hunter Jones. I got another message from Hunter that, his dad said it was an amazing experience there too. So I'm so happy to see families going to games, enjoying it like that. Multiple generations of Georgia fans there in the building and having a good time. That's really, to me, what Georgia football is all about. And the more and more we have that kind of thing, I think the better Dog Nation really is. So, Hunter, I appreciate the share on that, and also glad to hear that your dad was as impressed with Sanford Stadium as he was. Great stuff. We'll give golden shoes all around for that. And we'll also remind you, our lousy, stinking Gators. It's been a long time since they've beaten Georgia. About 1,836 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That is our Gator Hater Updater. Great way to close out the show. We love being on top of that rivalry. We love the fact that Georgia's kicking around Texas about as much as they're kicking around these Gators. That's a pretty good thing, too. The Texas trilogy was completed. Austin, Atlanta, and Athens. We're feeling pretty good about that there as well. Y'all have a great day. We're back tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you then. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews cool down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs, showing up on time, doing the work that's promised, the price promised. You can trust them on all of that today. All right, we'll get some of your comments here. We'll find out what you think. What's going on?
Mind if I get you started?
By all means, please do
I
so.
saw your viral tweet yesterday about Matthew McConaughey's wardrobe.
Yes, so let me just say this. That's one of those things I could not believe. Like, people need to understand something. I'm not a blue check. I don't get paid for Twitter. I could care less about any of this. But Jay, when I went back and looked at that tweet yesterday, I was like, why do people even care? I could not believe that thing took off the way that it did. Like, I don't have notifications turned on. I couldn't be less interested in this as I am. But that thing really took off, did it not?
Yeah, it certainly did. And so it got me thinking. We went back into the DawgNation archives.
Yep.
And the DawgNation cameras can prove that in all 3 games, Matthew McConaughey is
Oh, how about that? This is, that really is a very well done investigative report there. The same hat, the same jacket. I'm sure the jacket's many thousands of dollars. I don't doubt that. But it's the same outfit every time. I mean, it's kind of a weird thing. Like I said, I know a lot of Georgia fans that wouldn't be caught dead wearing the same outfit twice in the same season. And you got.
I respect lucky, whatevers, but when you're 0-3 at some point, get another hat.
Yeah, but you're right. That thing took off. I forgot that I even tweeted it. And I was just going back through something later on. Because the honest truth is that sometimes when I tweet something and it goes semi-viral or whatever, it almost gets on my nerves because I'm trying to find golden shoes and I can't find golden shoes because I got to scroll past everybody reacting to something that I now regret even having tweeted because now I can't do my job. And so this morning I'm trying to go through finding the golden shoe submissions and I can't get to them because for whatever reason, that seemed. So the thing now is the For You tab. Is that what it's called? So once these tweets get into the For You tab, now all of a sudden they just bang, 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 bang. Follower count has almost become irrelevant. I don't think social media, whether it be Instagram or Twitter, is driven by followers anymore. It's driven by, do you get on the For You pages? That's really what determines, this stuff now. It's like you can have 1 million followers or 12 followers. If your thing shows up on the For You deal, you're going to take off after that. All right, let's see what else. But that is very funny, Jay. I appreciate that. All right, let's see. Some of y'all are going back and forth with this Alabama fan. I couldn't care about that. Spencer Clark says, I'm a celebrity. I'm far from it. Far from it. I can promise you I live the least celebrity life you'll ever know. All right, how about this from Duncan Williams? Gunner versus ranked teams. 78% completion percentage, 14 total touchdowns, 1 interception. In the red zone, he's 12 touchdowns, no picks, 70% completion, 99 QBR. Fourth quarter, 86% completions, 7 total touchdowns, 7 incompletions, 0 picks. He's thrown 7 incompletions in fourth quarters. Hey, Duncan, that's great work. I appreciate that. That's awesome job on you. But the whole point of starting the show with this today on a day we could have started with a lot of different things. This is real. This is not just Georgia guy hyping up his guy and having some fun with that, although we would probably do that too. This is a real thing that is happening. Gunner Stockton is playing like the best quarterbacks in the country are. He is in that conversation. Oh, Scott Boland mentioning we did have a little brief appearance from Charlie Adams at the end of the show on Saturday. He had gone to the game. My wife did not come to the game. Charlie had gone with my brother and his cousins, and or his cousin, his other cousin didn't go. But he was like, can I come on the show at the end? I was like, yeah, that's fine. And so, yeah, we had a brief appearance from Charlie Adams. Scott, I'm glad you saw that. I appreciate that.
Charlie Adams, not a bad set of pipes for however it is.
Yeah, you know what? We have very verbal children. Our children are very verbal. They're big talkers. Shocking. I'm sure you're shocked to hear that we have talkative children. But yeah, Charlie's. It was also funny because Charlie had been yelling at the game, and so Charlie was very hoarse. And so you had like the dueling pianos of horse talkers, me and him both on Saturday. That was pretty funny. Boy, the comments on YouTube are flying in today. Wildman Slayer says he would ask McConaughey if he was a Texas fan not to come to the games against Georgia. They haven't won one since that bowl game, and we had players not there. Yeah, I mean, look, the Sugar Bowl 2018 was not a great experience, admittedly so, for what was a little bit of a frustrating season. But that thankfully has been completely eradicated from memories now. Jim Bobman says the Texas didn't have enough trash to throw on Dooley Field, so they threw Arch out there instead, which is obviously a reference to the bottle throwing incidents from last year. Christy on the red polo. Yeah, I like this thing, like the horizontal stripe deal. I think it looks good as an under, kind of an under thing too. I appreciate that, Christy. Thank you very much. Chef Jay Bowen says Dawgs by 50 this Saturday. I'm gonna tell you right now. Now, eventually we'll get there. I don't care if Georgia wins 10-7 on Saturday, as long as they win. It's like, give me some rest for some of these guys. You got a short week next week. Hopefully it's not scary. Hopefully it's not Ole Miss, Washington State. It's one of those deals where you have to like end up playing or, whatever. But coming off Texas, getting ready for TAC, it's senior day. Can we please just have an uneventful Saturday? But yeah. Let's see what else. Delmar Lane Reloaded says, win with no injuries. Yeah, that's my thing. It's like, I don't care if Georgia wins by 6 points. As long as we don't add to this injury list, we give some injured guys a chance to hopefully convalesce a little bit. I'll take that. I mean, it just gets to a certain point in the year where, like, I feel like I'm beat up and I haven't played, and there's no telling how beat up they must feel like. So it's just like I'm going into this Saturday thinking there's always a thing that I do. I have several rituals that I always participate in, and I'm very ritualistic in some respects. And like one of the things I always do is when we leave the bookstore to leave the game to go home, walking back across the bridge, I always stop and look back into the stadium across the bridge. Just my thing. I always do that. I've always done that. I will always do that. And first game of the year, when you do that, it's always that feeling of, boy, it's nice to have the season back. And I know I say this, and it sounds like such a cliche. It's just dumb. It's, feels meaningless. I cannot believe how fast these seasons go by. I cannot believe it. Even this one, to be honest, because of my voice and stuff like that, has been a little harder than most. It's been hard. It's been a hard year. Even still, it feels like the season has gone by so fast. I just can't believe it. And so on Saturday, we'll say goodbye to some seniors. And listen, as sentimental as I am, senior day always gets me. And now that we're post-COVID, now it feels like the seniors are real seniors again. Whereas like Georgia had some seniors that did senior day like 3 years in a row. Now it feels like your seniors are real seniors. So, sentimental about senior day, emotional because it's the last home game. Got to, say goodbye to the stadium for one more time, at least until the trophy celebration later on. I say in anticipation. But yeah, so the actual game itself between Charlotte would be like the third thing in my mind on Saturday. But hopefully it's not too dramatic. Craig Wade asked about C.J. Allen. So we know it's a knee. I'll just give, the shout out here. Our guy Rusty, has given you an update on that. Seems like he thinks there might be some good news at some point. But, we showed you the video earlier. I don't know. I know our people have got 1,000 things going on. I hate to be body language expert here. They always bring on cable news, the body language expert. There's nothing that's more pseudoscience than a body language expert. The body language from CJ here leads me to believe that CJ was a little concerned about this, that, that's not a great face in that situation. So I would say Charlotte's, almost zero chance to play against Charlotte. If I had to guess, Tech is a short week after that. It seems like a fairly educated guess that the Tech game could be in question there too. That's just me guessing. That is trying to make an educated guess, but that's just me guessing. I tell you what it reminds me of a little bit. It reminds me a little bit of Monty Rice in 2018. Speaking of, frustration at the end of the season. Monty Rice got banged up right there at the end of the season, ended up missing the SEC championship game. That was a big loss for Georgia in that game. I'm hoping that Allen's not that. And listen, maybe Kirby, we're probably a half an hour from Kirby as it is. Maybe Kirby will come out today and just be like, oh, gosh, guys, he's fine. Oh, he's going to play on Saturday. Now, even if he does that, I'm not sure I'll believe it. But hopefully, if we're talking SEC championship or college football playoff or something like that, hopefully C.J. Allen comes roaring back. He's had a great season, man. He's a very good player. Let me go to DawgNation.com for a minute. We'll see how they're doing. Connor's got a story at DawgNation.com about something we briefly mentioned today. How many Texans for Georgia seem to play well against Texas, and how important that seemed to be for Kirby Smart. That's a cool thing. Garrison Tucker says, does Utah throw a kink in another SEC team getting in if they end up with only 2 losses? I think the SEC's biggest problem from a 2-loss standpoint is all the other SEC teams could be in a similar situation. I think Texas, whether they rank 13th, that may be Utah, I mean to say. Utah was ranked 13th. That may be their ceiling. But Utah being ranked 13th could potentially help BYU. But I don't know that Utah being ranked 13th is going to be able to get in itself. But the SEC's problem is that just like a year ago, playoff level teams were excluded. Same thing's going to be true again this year. Matt Rukavina, who was very funny in the post-game show on Saturday, he says, listen, I call in, I got so much to say, but when it's all said and done, you just end up celebrating. Matt, in a weird way, I sort of feel the same way, where, I'm walking from the stadium over to the bookstore, getting ready to do the show, or even coming in today. There is so much that needs to be said where you're like, well, gosh, if you're going to do a good show, you can really only probably talk about 3 things. Like, you can't really do 15 things. Like, we didn't do a ton of, we didn't do a lot of the Texas natives. There's several storylines from that game that we didn't really talk about today. 4th down, Georgia going for it a couple times on 4th down. Didn't talk about that because you can't really talk about 9 things during a show. If I ever go home feeling like we didn't have a good show, that's almost always the culprit. And thankfully, hopefully, we don't have a lot of days in which I feel like, oh, wasn't maybe a great show. But if it ever feels like it was less than I wanted it to be, the culprit for the reason why is almost always that we tried to talk about too many things. Almost always the reason why. And so you pick 3 things, and that's what you talk about. Onside kick, Gunner for Heisman, Kirby's absolute torrid post game press conference. That's your three things. That's plenty. We can do some extra stuff with Jon, but that's basically it. Get to the SEC through. You can talk about 50 games, or you can spend a couple of minutes talking about 2 games. And it usually is better to spend a couple of minutes talking about 2 games. And so that's what we did. But yeah, so I'm just like you. In other words, it's like you're elated about the performance, but you're still trying to figure out, okay, but what were all the reasons why Georgia won the game? It's a really good point. Devil Dog says Georgia's a younger team. There's more to come. I was thinking about that, and there is a lot to take place before we even get close to thinking about this. I'm going to go ahead and call it now, though. Georgia will be preseason number 1 in 2026, no matter how the season ends. Preseason number 1. And listen, Georgia's been preseason number 1. It hasn't always, worked out the way we wanted it to. I'm not saying y'all are going to get excited about being preseason number 1. I'm not saying that. But yeah, this feels very much like a preseason number 1 type team for me. Third and Will. It's so funny that you bring this up, Will, because I was thinking about the same thing. I was going to tweet this yesterday, and I forgot to. I'm going to start the show at 9:25 because that's 35 to 10. It's so funny that you're saying that. So funny that you're saying that. And yesterday, when I finally looked at my phone, it was already later than that. I was going to do a 9:25 joke. I'm glad that you did. That's really good. That's really good. Garrison Tucker says, me and all those OU fans in Oklahoma City are very good friends today. Yeah, y'all are loving life. It's a pretty good day to be there in OKC right now. That's pretty good. Low Country says that, to quote Nolan Smith, that Georgia will not be preseason number 1. They'll go 7-5, which is very true too. Let's see what else. Savannah Bryant says, I talked to a Texas fan in a store on my way home. He could not stop talking about the atmosphere Saturday night. He said he sees how a real SEC stadium is during a big game. Yeah, Brian, it's a really good point that I have grown to hate Texas. Annoying, so annoying. And yet the individual Texas fans that I met on Saturday were all really nice, very classy, very complimentary of Georgia, complimentary of Athens. They were very touristy, and I mean that in a complimentary way. I'm touristy too. When I go to one of these places I've never been before, including Austin last October, I want to see it. I want to soak it up. I want to experience it. And really, I kind of like observing the other game day atmospheres. I want to see, they're doing a good job. They're making their atmosphere good. And what you're describing, Brian, I had so many experience with Texas fans who are the same way. And I'm like, well, how are the individual Texas fans decent people and the collective fan base is a total mess? How is that? How does that work out? I don't have a good explanation for that, but the ones that I met on Saturday were very, very cool, very, very cool, and really seem to be loving the experience in Athens. And I'm glad you say that. DT says, I'm Clark Griswold. I am very Clark Griswoldish. Very much. Always have been. Very Clark Griswoldish. We got the Christmas stuff going in the house. We're just big into that kind of thing. And what's fun about getting a little bit older is that you feel okay embracing that more. When you're younger, now I never succeeded at being cool, but there was always the attempt to put forth a cool veneer, to at least come across as you might be. As you get a little older, you just lose the desire to put up the front, and now I just fully embrace my Clark Griswold self. So yeah, if I go somewhere, there is no bigger tourist than me when I go to wherever. I want to see the landmarks. I want to do all that kind of thing. Like even the stuff that's kind of anti-Georgia. For instance, you go to Tuscaloosa, I'll go to the Bear Bryant Museum. I will. Even though that's Alabama propaganda, I'll go to the Bear Museum because I'm pretty much a sucker for a tourist trap, pretty much a sucker for a roadside attraction. Garrison Duggar brings up a decent point. I did think about this, is that the Georgia Texas tickets were not inexpensive. it's a decent travel. Austin to Atlanta to Athens is not an easy trip necessarily. So it's a fairly well-heeled fan that's probably coming from Texas to Georgia, of which they have many of those, and they're more than happy to tell you about that. So maybe that's why we got such a genteel representation from Texas. It was their landed gentry that was coming. That's maybe what it was. Their aristocracy that was showing up. Maybe that's what that was. Frank said Kirby may spend a day or two preparing for Charlotte, the next 8 or 9 days preparing for TAC. Listen, I wouldn't be mad at him if he did. I really wouldn't. I really wouldn't be mad at him if he did. Now, you can't lose to Charlotte, but if this thing's 21-3, who cares? Golly, who cares? Now, listen to the players. Some of y'all tune in every now and then. Don't listen to me. I'm an idiot. Don't listen to me. You listen to your coaches. Don't listen to me. But and like one of the things that, and we've had former players tell us this, what Kirby's pretty good at is he can make you prepare for an opponent without knowing you're preparing for an opponent. In other words, if they're doing periods during practice, he can just stick in a period for Tennessee offense, Tech offense, whoever it is the upcoming opponent is. He can just stick a period in that's about the other team. And if it's happening in the middle of a intense practice, the younger players don't even realize it. Some of the older guys probably are wise enough to know what it is. And some of them have told us they figured it out. But if you're in the middle of because Georgia does these, their practices move. It's one of those things I wish more fans got to see. I don't even get to see it very much, but when you do, it's just like this constant motion. So they're throwing stuff at them so fast that they can't even keep up with what they're doing anyway. And so if you just jam a period for somebody else in the practice, it happens all so quick that the younger players probably don't even notice. And we're led to believe sometimes what they do.
Dig deep on our YouTube page to find the Sugar Bowl practice from last year.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you can go see that there. And that was probably not quite the same pace that I've seen before, but yeah, you can go see that. Or the thing that made, I think, Kirby very mad, going back to 2017 when we went to the Rose Bowl. And, back then they were a lot more liberal about, video, because I don't think they realized how prolific some of this video is going to turn out to be. We did long stretches of video that day. I think that was the thing that ended video at Georgia practice. Jeremy Smith says Tech's 103rd in the nation total defense. Yeah, but their offense can move the ball. Now, against these bad teams, of course, but they had like 600 yards of offense. I mean, it's hard to do 600 yards against air. Duncan Williams says 19 minutes left. Texas defense stops Georgia for 7th straight time. Offense getting the ball back down 4 just after scoring. Instead, Arch doesn't see the ball to less than 9 minutes left, down by 18. Yeah, it's diabolical. It really is. It is diabolical. And Kirby said it in the clip we played a little earlier. You recognize it as heartbreaking. I think that's such an interesting word for him to use. Heartbreaking for the opposing offense, or the opposing defense, I mean to say. And it just comes back to the question of, what would my opponent least want me to do right now? And oftentimes that's just the best overall thing to do. Also, Devil Dog noticed, this happened 2 or 3 times today, the lights will occasionally flicker. So the other day, and we have some great engineers around here, we actually put a camera behind me shooting the lights to catch when the lights flicked, because we've had a little bit of an issue with that lately. And naturally, that day the lights did not flicker, but they flickered big time a couple of times today. Who knows why? Who knows why anything happens? I will tell you, we got to do some studio work this week. We're going to do the show from home Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week. It'll be basically the same show, but we will be from home on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week. Isha Murphy says, I definitely don't see Texas beating Texas A&M. Isha, I could see it happen. This on Facebook, by the way. I could see it happening. I could see it happen. I'm not saying it will, but I could. Marshall Fleming says, I have a friend that is big Texas donors. This is the nicest people in the world. The dumb fans and the dumb Alabama can't afford to go to the big game. He says most of the Texas fans that come here Saturday flew in on private jets. Yeah, I mean, I will say they must have had some impact on that because, I mean, the word on the street was the Athens airport got shut down. They weren't expecting. Let me try to speak English. They weren't accepting any more private jet landings, so apparently they must have been coming in from somewhere. I mean, Georgia has its own, pretty good share of private jets that come in, but Texas must have brought a lot of them too. Jennifer Stevenson Fleming brings up the bookstore. Yes, so on Saturday, the bookstore actually closed. I was really, I mean, listen, I get it. It's very late for them. I understand their workers want to go home, but that was the first time experience for us where normally even on the late games, they've stayed there for that extra hour after that, but they did close up at 11 on Saturday. So I think a lot of folks were hoping to come in and see us, and we weren't able to do that. Would have loved to have celebrated with all of you. Obviously, that would have been a great one to have our full crowd there, but just given the lateness of the hour, the bookstore was not able to do that. Let's see what else. Let's see what else. Get a couple more. Get ready to wrap it up after that. Ken Holcomb says this team, while not being as talented as the two recent championship teams, is so tough mentally and physically, they are making up for it. Go Dogs. Yeah, I mean, look, I'll be honest with you. I have been thoroughly entertained by the Georgia just figures out a way to win in the fourth quarter version that we saw a lot this season. But I have also, and I've said this sometimes, and I've thought it a lot more than I've said it. You can't do that every week. You cannot do that every week. It's awesome to do it, and it's incredibly entertaining. It's a better version of football than the game control version. And several of y'all sent me game control related messages this weekend because we've talked about that a couple of times. So, I mean, Georgia for a lot this season hasn't had game control, but they were battle tested. But like battle tested alone is not going to, I mean, eventually, if all you are is battle tested, eventually that's just too many battles and you're going to succumb to one of those. Well, Georgia just had game control, at least pretty good game control against Texas on Saturday. If the battle-tested version of Georgia is now figuring it out to the point that they're ready to own these fourth quarters and play a complete game on the road against Mississippi State, this played almost everybody close this season, almost everybody close. And Texas is a top 10 team, y'all. They're preseason number 1, and Georgia beat them by 25 points. There is a chance that Georgia is really, and I'll tell you this. I had a guy that I really, respect, ball knower type guy, close to the situation. He said it on Saturday to me. He goes, I think there's a chance that Georgia's really good. And I take that seriously because, look, we're obviously a pro-Georgia show, and we've had lots of things to celebrate about Georgia for a good number of years. To me, there's something maybe going on here. That's fun. But as Kirby said, humility is still a week away. We're not guaranteeing anything. We're not predicting anything. We're really not. But we're invested. We're in. We are in. DT says to the closest airport. So if Epps closes down, I mean, the one in Winder, I mean, there's a lot of, you ever drive by that one in Winder? It's not too far. No, of course, I guess you have to go through the indignity of getting like a Uber XL or something like that to get from there to the stadium, which is, I'm sure, just a absolute miscarriage of justice for the very well-to-do types. But there are a bunch of big jets at that Winder airport. You ever drive past that? There are a bunch of big jets over there. Bunch of big jets over there. All right, what else? Brian Whitaker checking out. Appreciate that. Good stuff. We're going to get ready to go here, too. Gary Holt's checking out as well. Jim Blair says the defense was all over Arch with pressure. Yeah, there was that one moment. It was the third down. I forget when it was in the game. But Quintavious Johnson came after Arch. This is pre-injury. Arch dumped it off, and C.J. Allen like an absolute missile. Pow. Goes over and makes the tackle, and Georgia gets off the field 3 and out. Like, that was Georgia now. That's like 2021. That's one of those things where there's just no room to breathe. Here's the play. Good job by our folks getting it. So Q, actually, no, that's a different one right there. That's a different one right there. But Q Johnson had a couple nice moments on Saturday. But he comes up the middle, dump off, and then C.J. Allen just comes, and this is why he won Allen on the field. He just comes flying over. Here it is. Johnson comes at him, dump it off. C.J. Allen just absolutely. That's what Georgia used to do. And on Saturday, they did it against the number 10 team in the country. That could be trouble, folks. That could be trouble. SEM Dog says he thinks that Christian Miller, Elijah Griffin, Nnamdi Ogboko clog up the middle for the Tech all day long, and Johnson and Harris will tee off on King. He says no early sleepwalking this year. Certainly could happen. And look, the Tech offense can just move the football. And the one thing that Buster Faulkner, he's going to do is all that motion stuff. They clearly want to neutralize the big bodies by getting everybody's eyes moving around. So they clearly want to do a lot of that. And listen, I think that Georgia has had to listen to a lot being said about Tech over the course of this year. A lot has been said about Tech. We already know how Kirby feels about Tech. That's been made abundantly. Kirby won't admit to any of this, but it has been made explicitly clear to us how he feels about Tech. So Georgia's going to have a high level of motivation for that game. They'll never say it, nor should they. I think they're tired of all the pats on the back that Buster Faulkner has been getting. And listen, I'll pat Buster on the back. I think he's a good offensive coordinator. I really do. Seems like a good guy. You can like Buster Faulkner and still hate Tech. But I think that Georgia on both sides of the ball is probably a little tired of some of the pats on the back that Buster Faulkner's been getting, if I had to guess. Matt Rugavina brings a really good point. Is that Tech's going to play Pitt the week before it plays Georgia, and that Pitt game's a big one for Tech too. And the Pat Narduzzi defense, that's a real. They got obliterated by Notre Dame, but we told you they were going to. Pat Narduzzi told you they were going to get obliterated. When a coach tells you, you just got to believe him. I'm not saying you should bet. You probably shouldn't. But if you did, I think that's fairly easy money. Narduzzi basically told you they didn't have anything for Notre Dame. That they're going to try to beat Miami. They're going to try to beat Tech. Now, the thing about Tech is, even if, Narduzzi gets after King, what's his face? The Prince kid's still a good quarterback to back up. All right, let's see what else. Miriam Corbin says, CJ, the eraser Allen. Yeah, he really is. And you'll probably, if I had to guess, you're going to probably be without him too. By the way, Miriam Corbin's got a new avatar on Facebook with the Lone Star logo for Georgia. I like that. Philip Wells says a lot of those private jets also go Peachtree to Cab. They always have a bunch of them there. But that, I'm telling you, man, y'all think like little old Winder, Georgia, they got some big planes that show up at that airport. Low Country Dog says, how come Miami's not ahead of Notre Dame in the rankings with a head-to-head win? Well, they definitely reevaluated that. The committee did this past Tuesday. You got to think there's more of that potentially coming. A lot of that was just a rebuke of the ACC. But if it gets down to it, it does become a question. Are you going to really keep a 2-loss Miami team out in favor of a 2-loss Notre Dame team that Miami beat? At a certain point, we'll ask the same question we asked about A&M beating Notre Dame. If you win the game and don't get credit for winning it, what was the point of playing it? And I mean that legitimately.
Got to figure out how that 3-loss Texas team gets in there.
Yeah, Johnny Prescott asked that too. And you had Herbstreit, Jay Black was somebody this on Saturday night. Herbstreit's on the broadcast making the case for Texas. Look, I'm not saying there's not a argument for Texas. There probably is. They have played a very tough schedule. And once again, you don't want to punish them for playing Ohio State necessarily. But it seems to me there may be a better time making that argument than the waning moments of a game in which they're losing by 25 points. And whatever breath you wasted touting Texas for the playoff, that could have maybe been better spent pumping up Georgia some more. Savannah Bryan on Justice Terry. Terry probably played more against Georgia than he has mostly this season. That might have been intentional. Listen, I think it's important that we not get our feelings hurt easily. Okay, he went over to Texas. All the talk about, who wants to just take the paycheck. Certainly it seems like Terry took a pretty big paycheck. But you never know how things work out in life. You never know. But given how little Terry's played this year and given how much he played on Saturday, some of that was probably intentional. You have to assume. All right, anything else? Miriam Corbin wants some Gunner for Heisman t-shirts. I like that. Doug Rayburn says, if Texas beats Texas A&M, what happens to the SEC championship game? So if Texas beats Texas A&M, my understanding is, and y'all check my facts on this, Georgia would go. And I've said before, I want Georgia to go if it can. I think you want to win the SEC or play for the SEC and give yourself the best chance at one of those buys. I just think you want that if you can possibly get it. And Texas beating Texas A&M would be the simplest solution there. So Alabama has the one conference loss, and technically it doesn't get credit for its head-to-head against Georgia right now because it's three-way tie with Georgia, Ole Miss, and Alabama. Georgia's already at 7-1. Ole Miss and Alabama are hoping to be 7-1 with rivalry games still left to come. But Alabama does, because remember, Alabama had that streak of 4 straight wins against ranked opponents. So Alabama's conference winning percentage is the winning percentage of Alabama's opponents is better right now than Georgia's. And I think Missouri, because Alabama beat Missouri, let me try to speak English. Missouri beat Mississippi State this weekend. Missouri was an Alabama opponent. Mississippi State was a Georgia opponent. And so that result probably helped Alabama. So the situation involving Alabama is pretty complicated. Now, if they were to lose to Auburn, that means Georgia would go. But if Texas were to beat Texas A&M, which could happen, that would also put Georgia in. So Georgia still has a chance of playing for the SEC championship. Jeremy Smith says, do you think Georgia still gets a bye if it's 11-1 and does make the SEC championship? And we'll finish with this because it is late. We got to go. They certainly could. Beating Texas as bad as they did helped. And if they were to handle Georgia Tech, and let's say that Georgia is sitting there 11-1, having played the schedule that it played, Alabama having lost again. So let's say that the simple result happens. That A&M and Alabama win out the rest of the way. They go on to play each other for the SEC championship. And let's say that A&M beats Alabama. A&M undefeated, they'd get a bye. Okay, so now it's going to come down to the loser of the Ohio State-Indiana game for the Big Ten title game compared to 11-1 Georgia. Now, what you would hope would happen would be, let's say that Ohio State beats Indiana, and the comparisons between Georgia and Indiana for the second bye, because there's a really good chance that Texas Tech gets one of those. There was a way to do this simply where it was going to be 2 SEC, 2 Big Ten teams, simple as. But now A&M has emerged a bit. Y'all, I gotta get off the air because I'm saying the wrong team names. Texas Tech, I mean to say, has emerged a little bit. They could get one of the byes, which only gives 3 to share between the SEC and the Big Ten. Both champs will get one. Then that theoretically leaves one more dangling there. And you'd like to think in a comparison of a 1-loss Indiana and a 1-loss Georgia, they would look at the much better strength of schedule for Georgia and give that to UGA. There could be, though, the argument that existed last year which is, well, you can't punish teams for losing the conference title game that Indiana went in as a top 4 seed. They can't exit conference title weekend no longer being a top 4 seed. That's unfair to punish them for not, for playing in a conference title game. I think that's pretty specious logic. That is logic that the committee might use. In comparison between Georgia and Alabama, I don't know that the argument of, well, you can't punish Alabama for losing the conference title game, I don't know that would hold in that situation, because Alabama would have more regular season losses than Georgia, even though it does have the head-to-head win. So simple answer, Georgia could still get a bye in the playoff, even if it doesn't play in the SEC championship game. But it would be far easier to get a bye by playing on Conference Championship Saturday. That is what I believe. And that is where we'll end the show today. So it's going to be a fun week. These are the conversations that we love getting to have. And I don't mind telling you, there was a lot of time this year I wasn't quite so sure we'd be doing this sort of talk, but now we are. And we're going to relish it. So thanks for being here. Y'all check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric, showing up on time, doing the work that's promised, the price promised. You can trust them on that, including getting your water heater replaced same day, perhaps if need be. RS Andrews is great at doing that. This is as late maybe as we've ever gone. All right, we got to go for now. Y'all have a great day. RS Andrews cool down back tomorrow. DawgNation Daily presented by Pella Window and Door George as well. Thanks for being here today. We hope you'll come back and see us again tomorrow.